How do you know what you ought to be practicing on the drums? Well, that all depends on where you are in your learning. Our goal today is to break this down so that you'll know exactly what level you're on as a drummer so that you'll know exactly what to practice. Hey everybody, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer, where we're all about learning the core skills that help you make music faster. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. I've divided this up into 5 main categories today, 5 levels that you might be at. And each of these levels really contains a lot of stuff. There's a lot to cover here. And so I'm gonna do my best to skim through it. Now, as I'm making certain points, I'll reference past videos on the channel that dive more into exactly what those points are, just for further learning if you wanna go check that out. But what I'll do my best to do here is outline at least 2 main points, like 2 main things you can work on within each of these phases. So you should be able to identify where you're at, and then from there, know what to practice, and then know what to work on to level up to the next phase. Phase 1, I just call this the get motivated, or you don't have to get motivated because you're already motivated, but it's just the excitement kind of phase. It's where you've just gotten started on the drums and you're excited about it and you're just playing along with records, maybe jamming with some friends, but for the most part, you're just having fun. You're not thinking too much about how you actually sound. You're just playing along with recordings. And that's really where a lot of the passion and the motivation behind drumming comes from. Those early stages when you first start playing, when you've got a favorite band and you're just jamming out to their tracks, and there's that thrill, and that's what gets you going, and that's kind of that phase 1 that you always want to come back to even when we get into later phases. If that's you, and if you've just gotten into the drums, or you're trying to really get that passion going, well, really the biggest thing to do there in phase 1 is find music that you're passionate about. Find a band or a drummer that inspires you, and try to be like them, try to play like them. Practice basic beats with snare on 2 and 4. Make it a goal to lock in with recordings where your snare is hitting exactly with the snare on the recording. Also try to pick out kick patterns. When you're listening to songs and you're jamming out, try to hear what the kick drum's doing, try to play those kick patterns and pick out the parts and the grooves and practice some of those fills that you hear. And if you want to be a pretty advanced phase 1 player, or you want to get ready to move into phase 2, learn basic music notation. Learn how to read those basic grooves where snares on 2 and 4. And if you can do that, that's really gonna help you as you progress into phase 2, which I call the technique phase. This is where the focus shifts to really cleaning things up and really evaluating your playing, figuring out, okay, how does my playing sound? How can I better improve my time and my coordination and my hand technique? How can I just make everything a little bit better, a little bit more professional, so I sound less like a kid just having fun on the drums? And that's a big step. The best thing to focus on here is hand technique. And again, that's where things come full circle, because hand technique is very basic. And so it's a basic thing to work on, but that's gonna help you so much with technique. And I've got a lot of past videos that reference this specifically. So I'll link all of them below according to category as we go through this, so that you can go check this out. It's important to be able to play slow, smooth singles and make sure that technique is loose so that you're able to go from one drum to the other smoothly. Because you want to be able to just sit here real chill and play around the kit quickly, and that's where that hand technique comes in. And so in order to level up your playing to a higher technical proficiency where you're more smooth and fluid around the kit, hand technique is where it's at. Practice rudiments, like practice alternating singles, work on your doubles, your paradiddles, and focus on keeping things slow. Slow and smooth is the goal. And if you do that, that's going to really help you a lot with the kit navigation. Practice, twisting your wrist to move from drum to drum. And think about moving arms less and wrists more. That's where the whole loose thing comes into play. If you're able to do that well, then you're probably using less arm, which is going to make it easier to navigate smoothly. So more videos specifically on that in the description below, so go check those out. Phase 2 is also the phase where you might start working with a teacher one-on-one. Maybe you're starting private lessons, or maybe you're just digging into seriously learning online. And this is where you might want to grab a method book. Grab something like Realistic Rock, which is a really good classic rock drumming method that starts with super beginner grooves and progresses into very challenging rock grooves. And so that book is great for just building up a groove vocabulary, working on coordination in a really fun way. And there's different techniques and approaches you can take with that book, different ways you can practice stuff. And so it's a really cool book to work through with a teacher. That's something that my teacher worked through with me when I was getting into this phase 2 and I started taking lessons, and I have my students work through it also. And of course, there's Syncopation by Ted Reed, just working on hand patterns. When we're talking hand technique, that book is really cool, really important. I'm gonna link both of those in the description below. So if you're at this spot and you really wanna up your technique, up your groove, and just your overall rock vocabulary, those are 2 really good books, really cool routes to go. Phase 3, this is just the listening musicality phase. And this is where really in order to get into this phase, you gotta be playing with people. You gotta get out and play with a band, jam with friends, really whatever. It doesn't matter what kind of setting, whether you're playing in a cover band, you're playing in the church worship band. That was where I was at when I was getting into this phase. And so doing that really helps you learn to listen to what's going on around you, figure out how what you're doing gels with what other people are doing. And this is where we really get into song learning because, back in phase one, we were just jamming out. We didn't care too much about learning the song. Maybe you were doing that when you were in phase one. Maybe you are if that's where you are now. But in phase three, you're actually doing the real world stuff now. You're playing with real people with a band. And so you've got to really make sure your song learning is efficient and that you're able to remember the form, the parts, the transitions, the fills, etc. And so that can be a big focus. If you're just starting to play with people, focus on learning songs. Like focus on sitting there and listening to songs. That's going to help a lot too. But also finding a charting method or a memorization method so that you can really solidly learn songs, because that's at the core of playing gigs well. And if you're playing with people, that's essential. I did do a past video about a charting method I use, so I encourage you to check that out. I think there's actually 2 videos about that. So go check those out if you're new to song learning. And of course, even if you're in phase 3 at this point, you're still working on phase 2 stuff. Technique never goes out the window. We're always working on technique, and we always want to maintain that excitement from phase 1. And so we want to maintain these things even as we're progressing into further phases. So at this point, if you're working on your technique and you're really getting comfortable with your playing, you should be able to shift your listening more to others around you than yourself. So that even if you're in the middle of playing a song, you're not so much thinking about, am I playing this part right? Am I playing right? And to not mess up, not mess up. You're thinking more about what's going on around you. You're listening to other parts going on around you. And that's a really big thing that kind of bridges the gap between phase 3 and phase 4. Phase 4 is the creativity phase. If you've entered into phase 4, you've gotten to a place where you know what to play and when to play it. You know the right groove for the song, and you know the right fills to play, and pretty much everything you play sounds right and feels right because you understand melody. This is a huge breakthrough phase. Once you get to this place where the technique has gotten to a point where you can listen more to what's going on around you, and you're spending more time just listening to music, listening to songs, and learning that way. So maybe more time listening to music than actually practicing because you've gotten your technique to a level that allows you to do that. Well, that's where this breakthrough can happen, where suddenly you begin to understand the relationship of melody to drum parts, to bass lines, to all of the parts going on in a song. It's all related to the melody, because the melody is there first. If somebody writes a song, there's the melody. They might have even written that first before the chords, but the melody and the harmony work together, and then the rhythm supports that melody. Every great song, especially with pop songs, rock songs, the drum parts are supporting that melody. The fills are supporting that melody. The fills aren't stomping on a vocal part or a guitar part, and the groove makes sense in relation to the melody. It either reinforces it, like maybe you're playing along with the melody, or you're offsetting it, or it's some kind of interesting relationship there. But either way, it's this musical relationship. You are cognizant of what the melody is doing, and you're basing your parts off of that. So if this is what you're working on, you feel like you're getting into this phase, practice singing the melody while you're playing, or even humming it. You could hum a bass line too. That's also a cool way to practice. And you'll get to a point where you'll start doing this naturally on gigs in a way. But practice singing the song as you're playing it, and at least humming the rhythm, and being very cognizant of the parts going on around you. So then you're really feeling how your parts interact with those and how you're a part of the bigger picture of the entire song. The best way to test these skills is to play with an original band. I know it's easy for me to say, and maybe you don't have that opportunity, but if it ever does come up, if you know somebody who's writing some songs, offer to help them out with the songs and help create drum parts and record with them. Because recording is the best. If you can go into the studio, record with an original band, that's the ultimate test of these skills, where you're having to create your own parts. There's nothing to copy. Nothing has gone before you. You've just got a song, and then you've got the total freedom to just do what you want to do. And that's really great practice to really getting comfortable with this whole creativity thing and interacting with the melody. So we've only got one more phase left, and that's kind of the step beyond this, or it's like a perfecting of phase 4. And I call phase 5 the execution phase. And this is the point where you've got your technique to such a high level that your execution is just always 100%. You're always nailing stuff every time you play it. And so you've got the mental, emotional aspect of drumming together, where you're playing musically, you're interacting with the melody, you're playing the right parts right off the bat, but you're also executing them really well, where everything is super clean, it feels just right. If you need to push at a certain spot, you're pushing. If you need to lay back at a certain spot, you're laying back. And so you developed all these instincts because of how well you listen and how well you feel stuff and how dynamically you play. The drummers who are at the top of phase 5 are top studio drummers, like somebody like John Robinson, who's been a studio drummer for decades. Somebody like Aaron Sterling, who I really respect, who's a really good studio player. So a lot of those guys, they've been doing this for so long and they've got so much experience amounted that they're playing at a high level of what I would see as perfection all the time. And as far as achieving that level, I'll tell you a little bit more about my personal journey with these in a minute, but I would think that it really comes down to experience and doing this a lot, recording a lot, so that you're doing the real world practice of all of the first 4 phases, but you're also learning how to get into a zone where you're confidently nailing stuff on the first take, but you're also in a place where you're flexible and you're willing to adjust your creative direction because maybe somebody else wants to do a different approach, or maybe they don't like the part you're playing. They're suggesting you do something else, but you got to find something that still works with that melody and that is still musically appropriate, but maybe isn't something you would have come up with. That's something that studio drummers are great at. And you've also got to sound like you've played whatever the song is that you're recording a million times the first time you're playing it. And you've got to go into the studio playing with people you've maybe never played with before and it feel like you've been playing together since middle school, where it's like you're tight buddies and you know how to play music together just because you listen so well. And so phase 5 is really the culmination and perfection of everything else leading up to it. So your question at this point might be, okay, Steven, which phase are you in? You talk about all these like you know what you're talking about. You talk about phase 5 like you know something about it. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't call myself a studio drummer. I've done studio stuff, I've done plenty of recording. A lot of it's with my band doing original stuff. But just to be completely transparent, I think I've been in phase 4 for a few years, and I think I've been dabbling in phase 5. Like there are certain moments where I feel like, you know what, I'm kind of getting into phase 5. This is feeling really good. I'm feeling good about myself. And other days, I don't know, maybe not so much. And so it does kind of depend on genre, and I know I haven't gotten to a point where I'm consistently in phase 5. This is definitely safe to say that. I've got a lot of experience to still gain and a lot of space to still grow, and so I think I'm in 4 and I'm kind of bumping into 5 sometimes. But just to go through my progression, I know I was in phase 1 for about 2 years when I bought my drum set when I was 13 until I started taking lessons when I was 15. And so that was kind of like the honeymoon phase with drumming where I didn't care how I sounded, I was just having fun, and that's something I still look back on as a really great time in my playing when I was just passionate about it. And then I started lessons, and that immediately began phase 2, where I had to clean some stuff up, get the technique together, improve my time, coordination, just those basics. And then within 3 months of taking lessons, I sort of got thrusted into phase 3 because I got dragged into the student high school worship band at my church, which was really great. That's something I'm still thankful for to this day, even though I was terrified at the time and it was way out of my comfort zone. But that opportunity, well, that was just what I needed to get into phase 3, practice, like playing with people, getting better at playing with real people in real world scenarios, playing songs. And so it forced me to get better at learning songs, to understand songs, to play appropriately for the song. And I think I spent the next few years continuing to work up technique, working on my chops, working on phase 2, getting better at phase 3. And I honestly don't think that I really entered into phase 4, where I knew what to play and when to play it, until I got near the end of college, when I finally began to grasp just an understanding of the relationship drums have to the song overall, the big picture and the melody. And once I started to understand that, a lot of things started to come full circle, and overall, that was a big breakthrough, and I became a better drummer as a result. And so ever since then, I've just been working on improving that, and the more recording I do, and the more playing with different people and different styles of music I do, the more I feel like I'm starting to push a little bit into 5, where my execution is getting better. So that's just to be completely honest with you and share with you how much time I spent in each phase. And I have a feeling that most drummers spend their whole life working on getting better at phase 5. And a lot of studio drummers out there would say that they've been working on that stuff for a long time still. And so that's where I'm at. I'm working on that execution and continuing to be more and more musical. I hope this helped you out. I hope this whole thing wasn't too abstract. And I hope that all the video references of past videos on the channel digging into some of these specific things will really help you out too. So go check those out. Check out the 2 method books I mentioned. Whatever phase you're in, identify it and figure out, all right, what can I work on to level up? What can I work on to get better at the level I'm at now? I've given you as many tips and as much info as I can, so I hope you can take some of those and run with it and have fun.